Welcome everyone to the Texocity series presented by 210 Culture and Pub Culture Radio. My name is Donna and I'm your host. And let me tell you, there is no excuse on why I've been so MIA on my Texocity series. I'm just gonna be straight up. 2021 was a shit year. I had to just take the longest break of my life to get my shit together. Have I gotten my shit together, you ask? Absolutely not. But I'm trying every fucking day. When you're listening to this, because it's going to be recorded before the new year, Happy New Year! I'm so excited for 2022. I'm going to keep being the consistent dumb bitch that I am every day. In today's case, we are talking about Robert Ben Rhoades, aka the Truck Stop Killer. You know that episode of SpongeBob where they're trying to name like the new Krusty Krab because they're rebranding, and then they're like the Cuddly Crab, the Killer Crab. Anyways, that's what I feel like when I say the Truck Stop Killer. It's said that Robert killed and raped more than 50 victims during the span of 1975 to 1990 between Texas and Illinois. Let us pray. Begin. Robert Ben Rhoades was born November 22nd, 1945. Sus. Very fucking sus. According to a study, most serial killers are born in November. Don't take it from me, folks. This is a scientific evidence, boy. I'm an island boy, and I'm just trying to make it. I'm just trying to make it, y'all. He was born in Council Bluffs, Iowa, and was the middle child of 4. Couldn't find the names of his parents, but what I did find is that there isn't much known of where he was exactly raised, but that he was raised mainly by his mother during the early years of his life. His father was in the United States Army and was stationed in West Germany. Robert was in elementary school when his father returned overseas and was discharged from the military to work as a firefighter. Robert seemed normal. He did have some social problems, but he was active in various extracurricular activities at all the schools he attended and was involved in sports and other programs, including gridiron football. I had to Google whatever the fuck what gridiron football is, and it's basically like American football. I just didn't know it had a name like that. Anyways, don't judge me. I am not smart. So he did that. Wrestling, choir, and the French club. Robert's criminal history didn't start until high school. At the age of 16, he got arrested for tampering with a vehicle and got arrested again at 17 for public fighting. But did he win though? I couldn't find any information on that shit, man. How you over here going to be arrested for public fighting and we don't even know if you fucking won, bro? Robert would end up graduating from Thomas Jefferson High School in Council Bluff, Iowa in 1964 and joined the Marine Corps. That same year, Robert's father was arrested for molesting and doing acts on a 12-year-old girl, and while awaiting trial, had committed suicide. In some previous confessions that Robert made, he may have experienced sexual abuse from his father and witnessed his father's violent acts, which caused him to commit all these crimes. In 1968, Robert would get married after returning to Council Bluffs, Iowa, and had a son. I can't find the name of his first wife, but yes. He divorced his first wife in 1972 and got married 2 more times. Robert would eventually be dishonorably discharged from the military in 1967 or 1968 for his involvement in a robbery. After his dishonorable discharge, Robert decided to attend college, but eventually dropped out, and would later attempt to join a law enforcement agency, but was likely rejected for his past dishonorable discharge from the Marine Corps. Yeah, when you have that dishonorable discharge, like, you're fucked. If you want to get anything like, I would say even like state and federal, but I'm not too sure. What the fuck do I know, right? This led Robert to find work in stores, supermarkets, warehouses, and restaurants, where eventually he became a long-haul trucker traveling all over the country. During his time as a truck driver in the 80s, Robert began to involve himself in the BDSM scene, Oh, he a little freak. He a little freak. For those who don't know, BDSM is a practice or role playing in the bedroom revolving bondage, submission, dominance, and other shit. It is said that his nickname during this time was Whips and Chains. A la verga. Damn. He really wanted to be kinky with that shit. As I mentioned earlier, Robert was married a total of 3 times, and he would eventually meet his third wife, Deborah Davis, at a bar in Houston, Texas in the 1980s. Robert was in a pilot uniform, and the two turned the fuck up. Deborah would state that Robert seemed like a nice guy, and they started dating. Deborah, months later, learned that Robert wasn't even a pilot. Damn, that fool was lying. He was lying ass motherfucker. Just a greasy ass old truck driver. But she was so in love. She wanted to give the relationship a shot and continued to date him. That's red flag number 1, sis. You should have ran the fuck up. Robert and Deborah's relationship took a turn when Robert was found with another woman at a party and made Deborah feel as if something was wrong with her. They eventually reconciled their differences and got married. The first few months of their marriage were great until Deborah noticed that Robert wanted that coochie all the time. I don't know if you guys have seen that reel where the girl's like, my boyfriend doesn't even know how to act. And he wears a ski mask and he's like, give me your coochie. I love that. Yeah, so Robert wanted that coochie all the time. Deborah was not comfortable with some of the things that Robert made her do and even would have sex with her against her own will at one point. She says that Robert became sexually aroused by seeing her suffer, specifically when she was hospitalized for lupus. Deborah was also involved in the BDSM scene, although she never wanted to participate. And Robert even went along the lines of buying his wife a male sex slave, but refused to see him. Damn! I don't know how I'd feel. You know, my man buying me a sex slave? I'd be like, alright, fine, whatever. I'm just kidding. That pushed Deborah to finally end things with Robert. When Deborah decided to leave, Robert went wild. W-I-L-D, wild. He went into rage, physically assaulting her. Deborah was able to escape and finally able to move on from this sick fuck. Deborah and Robert were married for about 1.5 years, and months later after the separation, Robert would be arrested for kidnapping a woman in Arizona. Dun dun dun! Robert preyed on hitchhikers and truck stop sex workers while he was a long-haul trucker. And according to different websites, it all started in the 1970s. So his first confirmed case were the murders of Patricia Candace Walsh, who was 24, and husband Douglas, Zakowski? I'm just going to say Zakowski, 25. Both victims, who were originally from Seattle, were hitchhiking in Texas and were trying to get to Georgia, preaching the Christian gospel when Robert allegedly picked the two up. Now, Robert had his sleeper cab of his truck equipped like a dungeon with handcuffs on the ceiling to which he would incapacitate his victims, sexually assault them, and torture them before they were killed. He had a quote-unquote murder kit containing chains, cords, whips, and leashes, as well as dildos and clips, pins, and fish hooks that he used on the victims' genitals. It is said that when he picked up Patricia and Douglas, he killed Douglas immediately and dumped his body on January 1990 somewhere in Texas. He drove for 7 days with Patricia held captive and was raped and tortured in his cab before shooting her multiple times and dumping her body. Police had found Douglas's body near I-10 east of Ozona, Texas, late January of 1990, although he wasn't identified until 1992. It took 13 years, y'all, 13 fucking years for authorities to identify Patricia's remains after deer hunters found her body near the mouth of a canyon on Millard County, Utah. It was identified only by dental records in 2003. A month after Patricia and Douglas's murders, Robert grabbed an 18-year-old, a drifter, who fortunately escaped and informed police. Robert was detained, but the victim declined to press charges, feeling that she was not going to be believed despite the evidence. Her statement to police said that, quote, "I don't see any good in filing charges. It's going to be my word against his. If there was any evidence, I would file charges and sue him," unquote. It was later noted that the victim was actually fearful of Robert after she endured 2 weeks of his torture in his truck. He cut her hair and shaved her pubic hair before she escaped. Damn, bitch, I would have been like, fuck that dude. Sue his ass. I'm gonna sue his ass. I'm gonna charge him with every fucking charge that I can get. Should have been done with that shit, bro. Days after the incident, in February of 1990, 14-year-old Regina Kay and her boyfriend, Ricky Lee Jones, who were both runaway teenagers from Pasadena, Texas, were picked up by Robert. Robert killed Ricky Lee Jones immediately while holding on to Regina for as long as possible. Robert took several photos of Regina as he held her captive, photos showing different lengths of Regina's hair growth and various bruises, which indicated that he held her captive for a good amount of time. During Regina's time being captive, Robert cut her hair, shaved her pubic hair, and pierced her genitals with fish hooks. In a series of photos Robert took of Regina, she wore a black dress, oversized black heels, and just a terrified expression on her face. She was made to pose in front of and inside an old barn. Robert would even call her father from different payphones. One call in particular, he told Regina's father that he had cut her hair. Other times, he would tell Regina's father that his daughter was in a barn loft, and when her father would ask if she was alive, he would hang up. These calls were made over a 2-day period and were traced to Oklahoma City the first day and Ennis, Texas the next day. Police were able to salvage some evidence when they researched Robert's apartment and had found a notebook belonging to Regina which had the unlisted phone numbers of her father, mother, grandmother, and friends. The notebook also had a message that read, quote, "Ricky is a dead man," unquote, and a drawn picture of a gun and drops of blood. There were also cryptic notations that indicated directions and other unknown meanings like water tank, fun and hide. After torturing Regina with fish hooks and other instruments he had, Robert took one final set of photos of Regina just before killing her with a baling wire that was attached to a wooden beam. The wire had been twisted many times beyond the point needed for death. He then threw her body in a barn off of Interstate 70 in Illinois, where she was found in September. Ricky Lee Jones's body was found March 3rd, 1991 in Lamar County, Mississippi, but was not identified until July 2008. His family never reported him as missing. That's wild. Well, you kind of have to understand of the perspective of the family. If they're runaways, it's kind of like, oh, fuck it, just let them leave. But at the same time, like, you don't know what happened or what's gonna happen. So I can understand them not reported him as missing if they really didn't know that he was missing in the first place, but I would still try to keep tabs on him. On April 1st, 1990, Arizona State Trooper Mike Miller saw Robert's truck parked on the side of the road in the early morning hours. Mike wondered if the trucker was having any issues. When Mike approaches and opens the sleeper cab, he sees a woman naked in shackles and chained to the wall. She screams frantically when she sees him, and Miller sees Robert scramble through the curtains separating the sleeper cab from the front seats. While trying to keep the woman calm, Miller goes to the driver's side of the truck and orders Robert to get out. He complies, telling Mike that everything was all right and that he was carrying a gun. Mike was a bit confused, seeing Robert so calm and the victim so terrified. He eventually arrests Robert and puts him in the back of his police car. Mike goes back to check on the woman and sees that she had been badly wounded. She had red welts on her body and cuts on her mouth. She had a horse bridle strapped around her neck and a long chain padlocked to the horse bit. Her hands and ankles were handcuffed. Mike called the city of Casa Grande for backup. Mike tried covering the woman's body until help arrived, but the woman was terrified that Robert would return. Meanwhile, Mr. Houdini up in this bitch, Robert manages to get his hands down to his feet and bring them up so that the cuffs were in front of him. He also unfastened his seatbelt. Mike realized that Robert could have killed him too, climbed into his truck, and just drove off. Damn, how the fuck did he do that? He was so athletic that he could fucking do that shit? Luckily, Officer Robert Gygax of the Casa Grande PD pulled up behind him. Gygax managed to free the woman from the handcuffs Robert had and was taken to the police station. The victim felt more at ease, and after her injuries were photographed, she began giving police information about Robert. Robert picked up the victim at Rip Griffin's truck stop just north of Phoenix. She would often hitch rides in order to visit friends, saying that Robert was very polite at the truck stop. The victim had been asleep when he stopped the truck, shoved her into the sleeper cab, and shackled her. Robert would then take his torture items from a briefcase, and she had been tortured on and off since he picked her up earlier in the day. The red welts on her body were from whippings that Robert would do, telling her to say his name is Whips and Chains, and she correctly took this to mean this was his CB radio nickname. He had also told her how he had been doing this for 15 years. He'd been doing this a long time. He was doing this while he was with Deborah, and I'm sure even before then with his other wives. Like, he's such a sick fuck. Police had asked the victim if she had been raped, to which she hesitated to answer before Mike stated that she had been rescued in time. Evidence suggests that because her injuries were severe and her nipples and labia had been punctured, they assumed she was too afraid to answer the question. Robert was taken into custody, and the video camera shows him stretched out comfortably on the couch yawning. It is said that Robert spent a long time explaining how the woman they found in his truck was, quote, not playing with a full deck, unquote, and that he was tired and didn't have the time or an inclination to screw around while on the road. He then explained the term, quote, lot lizard, unquote, or women who loiter around truck stops. He claimed that's what that woman is, quote, saying that you just don't get involved with women at truck stops unless you want your dick to fall off, you know, unquote. Famous words, everybody. You don't get involved with women at truck stops or your dick will fall off. Thank you. Just stay abstinent. Detectives who investigated and interviewed Robert said that they felt disturbed at the fact that Robert was acting so normal and acted as if the shackled woman in his truck had been her own doing, that it had been his bad luck to offer the crazy woman a ride. As Robert was being booked for aggravated assault, sexual assault, and unlawful imprisonment, a teletype was sent nationwide and a letter was faxed to the Superior Court judge in Florence, Arizona, to detain Robert at least until some information came in. Detectives would then call Houston PD, since Robert lived there. It wasn't long before Houston PD would relate the details of a similar kidnapping, the 18-year-old that didn't press charges, to which the truck and the driver matched the description. When police brought her face to face with Robert, the victim looked at the ground and said he was not her attacker. The officers couldn't detain Robert any longer. It wasn't until afterwards that the victim confirmed that Robert was her attacker, but police were iffy about her statement and didn't get anywhere. Since these cases technically took place in different states, it took a long time to convict Robert of all the confirmed cases he committed. After investigators linked Robert to Regina Walters, they notified Illinois, since Robert would have to be tried there for the murder of Regina, since that's where her body was found. Quote, I called Arizona, where Rhoades had been sentenced to 6 years for the kidnapping of Katie Ford, the last victim in Casa Grande, unquote, says Young, one of the investigators. Quote, he was about to begin a work furlough program. We wanted the evidence that was seized from the truck, and to my amazement, it was tagged for destruction, unquote. Why do they do that? If they know a big chunk of evidence is like a vehicle, a house, blah, 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 why the fuck would you tamper with it, and why the fuck would you destroy it? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. What is wrong with you people? They managed to salvage the evidence, and it wasn't until early 1992 that the Bond County, Illinois state attorney was convinced that there was sufficient evidence against Robert. Robert's trucking logs had been analyzed by the National Center for the Analysis of Violent Crime at the FBI headquarters in Quantico, and found that skeletonized bodies had been found in areas where Robert had traveled. In September 1992, Robert was shown all the evidence against him by his court-appointed attorneys, who wanted to negotiate a plea agreement in order to spare him the death sentence. Robert would plead guilty to killing Regina Walters in 1994 and receive a sentence of life without the possibility of parole. He was extradited to Utah in 2005 to be tried for the deaths of Patricia and Douglas. However, in accordance with the victim's family's requests, which that's what it says on Wikipedia, but I'm not too sure, the charges were dropped in 2005 and was returned to prison. Robert continues serving life without parole sentence at the maximum security Menard Correctional Center in Chester, Illinois. I saw something, I think later on, he was charged for the couple. He's charged with like 2 life sentences without possibility of parole. So he's such a sick fuck. And of course, I'm sure there were many others he tortured, raped, and killed. But with his preferred victims being hitchhikers and sex workers, it's difficult to know for sure how many victims he actually has. Crimes against people like this are very underreported, and families usually never check on them or are not accounted for. Police believe that he killed 3 women each month he was active. And I just want to point out this article that I read, and I'll put all the articles on the description link, about the psychology behind the way he tortured his victims. And in Robert's case, his approach was psychotraumatic play, reenacting his own abuse on others. So Robert was playing with these victims and treating his crimes like a game. His signature of cutting the victim's hair, shaving their pubic hair, and taking photos of them was some kind of mirroring from his past, mirroring an image of himself when he experienced abuse at the hands of his father. It seemed like his father was really like abusive on him, because when they ask him about it, he doesn't want to go into details, and he's just like, yeah, I got abused, but he never really explained how. Maybe that's what really fucked him up, because it can. Going through my shit that I'm going through, and I'm going to therapy. I'm going to therapy. Yay. Whatever you do as a parent affects your child. Just keep that in mind. Thank you guys so much for joining me on this episode of the Texocity series. Be sure to like and subscribe so that you guys can be notified of the latest episodes of the Texocity series. And let me know what you guys want me to research next. Other than that, I will definitely be coming back and becoming bigger, stronger, better. Just wait for it, baby. And if I'm inconsistent, I am sorry. That means I fell off the wagon. And shit happens, and I go through shit too. But anyways, I will see you guys later. Bye.